guys, welcome back to my channel, and hello if you are new here. Thank you so much for joining. So a couple of weeks ago, I did like a poll asking you guys what kind of videos you'd like to see, and I just thought I would film them and upload them in order of what was most popular. And one of the ones that a lot of you guys wanted to see was what are the spiciest books that I have ever read. And I can absolutely provide you with the recommendations for that because, yeah, you best believe I've read a lot of spicy books. Just want to say before we get into this, I do not read books with this level of like spice on a regular basis because even I couldn't do that. I do sometimes need to just read a story and not be reading about these relations between people that are just, yeah. Also, just want to say, because these are like 5 out of 5 on the spice rating scale, in my opinion, some of them even 6, I think literally all of these books bar one are dark romances. So just bear that in mind if you're not like an avid dark romance reader. I do honestly feel like you can't get to 5 out of 5 without it being dark romance because quite a lot of the nature of what's going on in some of those books are obviously darker, they're way more intense, they are exploring avenues that you wouldn't explore in a contemporary romance. Things are happening in these books that you just aren't going to read about in like a workplace office romance. What I will say is there are some books in here that even though the level of spice is just through the charts on these, the stories are really good. They are really good, they're fast-paced, they're page-turners, they're exciting. So we're gonna start with the only book here that isn't a dark romance, which is Praise by Sara Cate. This is insanely spicy just purely for the fact that there is a lot of spice over many chapters throughout the story, but it doesn't overpower the plot by any means. I really, really enjoyed this book, and this is the one that I would probably recommend the most to people. If you've read books of like maybe a bit of spice in them here and there, even things like the Twisted series or Chestnut Springs, so I feel like everybody's read or is reading those kind of books. This is a book that kind of takes it a little bit further than those ones do. So I would recommend this as a stepping stone before you pick up any of my other recommendations. Or of course, if you are someone that knows you just want to read that stuff, every single chapter in every book, then the next books will be for you. But yeah, Praise by Sara Cate is a great one because it's actually really fun. It's not too intense. You don't have to take it too seriously. And it's actually written quite well. Okay, so next up, I've got some vampire romances. And I do feel like anything vampire romance is pretty spicy, to be honest, because just, you know, vampires, biting, all things. And then the way authors choose to write their vampires, everybody has different ways that they sort of like present the vampires that they've made. Like quite often, there are a lot of things that you'll find across dark vampire romances that are pretty similar in the way that people react to like being bitten by a vampire, the effects that has on somebody. And yeah, it just kind of like elevates the experience, to be completely honest. This is a dark romance, but it's not heavy or anything like that, and it's Court of the Vampire Queen by Cate Robert. This, I'll be honest, is more spice than plot, to be completely honest with you, but it is really fun. I had a really good time with it. It's one of those books that I would recommend if you are in a reading slump and you just want something really fun, spicy, different, because obviously it's vampires, and so you're like sort of leaning towards fantasy because vampires aren't real. I wish they were. I would really recommend this one. I had so much fun with it. It actually got me out of a reading slump, but I did read this now about 2 years ago. I do remember the premise of the story really well. I think I gave it 4 stars. It's definitely 5 out of 5 for spice. So Court of the Vampire Queen is another great one, especially if you haven't read a lot of dark romance. This is good to dip your toes into that sort of side of it. It also has a lot of other really cool things in it. I'm pretty sure one of the vampires is also a shifter. It is a storyline, there's lore, it's very fast paced. I think there's one bed trope, forced proximity, rivals, like all of that good stuff in that book. So it is a really fun read. Staying on the theme of vampire romance, this is Blood Orange. I think this is a step darker than Court of the Vampire Queen, and this is the first book in a duet. Let me just grab the other one. So this is the second book in the duet, which is Black Rose, and the first one is Blood Orange. This one isn't anywhere near as spicy as the first one is, and I do think Blood Orange is so much better. The duet as a whole, I do highly recommend. In terms of spice, Blood Orange is it's up there. Also, I do think as well, if you're not an avid dark romance reader, you could still probably definitely read this because it's really intriguing. It's set in Venice, it's mysterious, it's got like an academic setting, it's kind of like a taboo element to it, like teacher-student. It's not like teacher-student romance that you'd read in other books. That's very subplot to it, but it just adds that extra element of like a taboo romance. And yeah, it's spicy, and it's spicy quite soon as well. I think that's another thing, like when books and the spice in books starts really quickly, you know you're in for a wild ride. Like these authors aren't even easing you into it. It's just happening. The story of this book is so good. It's essentially about love transcending time regardless of like what path you're on, you're always going to find the person you're meant to be with. I know that sounds really deep considering I'm on a video talking about what the spiciest books I've ever read, but honestly, this is why you can get away with spice like that, because when you've got a good plot and a good strong storyline to go along with it, it's digestible. Portrait of the Vampire Queen, the plot isn't as strong as this one. You just kind of feel like you're reading smart constantly. But with this, it's got such a good story. The writing is so good. It's beautiful. All the best tropes in it. It's in the best setting. It's like literally like mysterious Venice, old school vibes. I just love it so much. And I really would recommend it. It's actually one of my favourite reads of last year. I gave it 5 stars. So I thoroughly recommend Blood Orange. And also the covers are just beautiful, so it's a no-brainer. Okay, so another one is Promises and Pomegranates by Sara Miller, which is the first book in the Monsters and Muses series. Now this one, I wouldn't say there's that many spicy chapters, but it's the context and the content of what's going on in here. It's pretty like, whoa. It also has elements of mafia and forced arranged marriage. It is also an age gap romance, so again you have the taboo element, but honestly Cal Anderson is one of the best book boyfriends ever. Elena's okay, she's kind of bland, but this series is so good. But this is definitely the spiciest and probably the darkest. This one and the last one, Lies and Liaisons, they are the darkest books of the series, but they're not that dark. So again, if you haven't read a lot of dark romance, you could definitely put this up and not be scarred for life. Okay, the next book recommendations are dark romance. Extremely spicy, so be warned. Proceed with caution. So the next one is Heartless Heathens by Santana Knox, and this is a why choose a romance. It's in a dystopian setting, but it's kind of like the church has taken over, so it's set in like the near distant future where politics, everything like that, the government, everyone's fallen and the church has risen, and that's the kind of world that they're living in, which I really loved that idea. And it follows a girl who is locked away in like a church tower, and these 3 guys find her, and so the story begins. Everything about this book just screams forbidden. 2 of the guys are twins, and then it's their friend, and there are some scenes in this book that are just, it really goes there. If you're somebody who does need to check triggers or read content warnings, this is one of the books I would say you need to do it for. But it was a really good read. It just is quite dark, and it is extremely spicy, and Santana Knox does not hold back in accurately describing what is going on between the 2 characters. So like I said, books like this, I can't read all the time, but sometimes they're fun. And I actually think I still rated this 4 out of 5 stars. Like the actual story itself is good. I do think quite a lot of the time in dark romance, people focus too much on what's going on in these scenes and not actually on what the story is. And the actual story of this is pretty good. It's about a girl who has been very sheltered, very controlled, and she's finding her freedom and is allowed to be who she really wants to be with these guys. So like when you really break down the story and take all the spice out of it, you've got a good plot, especially the world that it's setting and everything. It's just if you can overlook the spice if you're not used to it. It is quite spicy. The next books are a duet, and they also come with a novella, and it is The Losers Duet by Harley LaRue. First book, which is the novella, which you were recommended to read before, or you can just read it on its own. It's literally a tiny novella. This is insanely spicy. This follows one night at a Halloween party, and it's where Jessica first meets the boys, which we then go on to read all about them in these books. And it's to do with what goes on between her and Manson, and then inevitably her and the rest. And oh my god. This is spicy, okay? But it's quite short. So also, if you want to dip your toes in and you haven't read anything really like that before, or that kind of content before, maybe just try a novella, because then you'll know if it's something you'd actually genuinely want to read across a book this big. Writing itself is written so well that I was just, it made me go to pick up the duet. And then what I will say is the duet was one of my favourite reads of last year. I rated both books 5 stars. The story, the actual storyline is about a girl who is not being true to herself because she wants to be the popular girl, but that's not really what she's like. She's hanging around people she doesn't really like, but she feels like she has to take this path. And the losers, which are the boys, who she finds herself ending up being drawn towards because she can be herself when she's around them. They each have their own story, and we delve into their past, there's so much character development in it, there's so much depth to all of the characters. It's about like being accepted by your family, being accepted by your friends, about being able to be who you truly are, about expressing yourself. So again, the story is so good. I actually got emotional by the end. I was very attached to the characters. I thought it was amazing, and I know that this duet is a favourite among a lot of dark romance readers. But yeah, the spice in it is spicy. All I'm going to say is we all read 50 Shades of Grey, didn't we? The whole BDSM stuff. This is that, but way more mature, way more educated, and just better in so many aspects. I know that going into it, that it is very heavily focused around that kind of stuff. I will say these books are very character driven, so if you're not a fan of that, they can feel slow at times, but it's a process. It's about people coming of age, like being who they really want to be, like overcoming their bullies at school, like all of that good stuff. So it is a really good duet. It just contains a lot of interesting stuff. Okay, so next up, this is Satan's Affair by H.G. Carlton. Now, if you don't know about this novella, I'm sure everybody does by now, but it is Sibby's book, and you are recommended to read this before the Cat and Mouse duet, which is Haunting and Hunting Adeline, which I feel like everybody, their mum, their aunt, and their aunt's brother's sister has read at this point. If you didn't know this existed, and you've already met Sibby, go back and read this book. It will give you so much context that I'm sure you probably really feel like you needed meeting Sibby's character, because what a character she is. But this basically follows, if you've read Haunting Adeline, you'll know that Satan's Affair is like a carnival fair thing that sort of comes around every year at Halloween, and Sibby lived there and in one of the haunted houses. What I will say, this for me is like a 6 out of 5 on terms of the spice scale. I can't explain it really on here. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say these things on YouTube, to be completely honest with you. But I would read and check the content warnings for this before you go into it. But again, it's only a novella. It's not like you're committing to a whole book of crazy stuff. I thought I knew what I was getting myself into, and I kind of didn't. And then by the end, it just kind of blew my mind, because the ending of this book is crazy. But it is a really fun, Halloween-y, dark, horror aspect element story to it. And that's all I'm gonna say. Do you know what I'm realising? That all of these books I read way over a year ago, and it's almost like I haven't read anything quite of this calibre in such a long time. Based off of this, because this is the Lord series by Chantal Tessier, I do actually have 2 more books out of that series that I haven't read yet, so I know for a fact that sometime soon I need to get myself prepared for this level of spice. But the Lord series is... yeah. Lastly, I want to say that Sabotage, which is a novella, is very heavy on a lot of types of kinks and things that might not be everyone's cup of tea. So make sure you read in the beginning what the content warnings are going into it. She's got a whole page warning you guys of what is in this book, and quite a lot of these books come with it, so just know that. This book I didn't get on with that well, just because it was actually too heavy for me, and that's saying something. Not everyone's like me. You might be an avid dark romance reader and have not read this yet and absolutely loved it. I think I only rated it like maybe 2.5 stars, just because what was going on in this book, I just felt like it wasn't justified, or we didn't have enough characters' depth for me to even connect or understand why this was going on. It was really that spicy that I was like, no, I just can't connect to this story, but I have to recommend it anyway. This is a recommendation video for exactly that kind of book. The Lord series, so The Ritual and The Sinner, which are the 2 books that I have read in this since, have got some really strong plot, and I really did enjoy these books. I gave The Ritual 4.5 stars and Sinner 4 stars. Sinner as a whole is a much darker story than The Ritual, but this series, do not go into it unprepared. It is dark, it is heavy, and it is extremely spicy as well, and sometimes you just feel like what you're reading is just so wild that you're like, what is going on? It's also really fun at the same time. This series is Dark Academia Secret Society. The scenes are so long, like some of them go on for just pages and pages, and yeah. So there we go, guys. That is my roundup of the spiciest books that I have ever read. These books, I just want to say, I literally read between a year to 2 years ago. I have not picked anything up like this for a while. Since I got back into reading religiously, which was the last 3 years, I've read about 350 books. So we're only doing a roundup of like 12 books. 12 books out of the 350, you know? So yeah, you know, 12 out of the 350 books that I read in the last couple of years. Some of the stuff that goes on in these authors' minds, I just, fair play to them for writing them and publishing it, honestly, because we read it. We read it. So if you like this video, guys, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Please leave recommendations for what videos you'd like to see down below. I'm thinking about maybe doing a darkest books I've ever read as well. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in my next video.